Hello guys, good afternoon. Today I'm going to do 3 pros of life in the UK versus 3 pluses of life in Ukraine. I know 3 is very few and I plan on doing more and more of these videos, but we'll see how this video goes first. So guys, I'm going to start off with, cheers pigeons. So guys, I'm going to start off with the UK and 3 things I like about the UK compared to Ukraine. So the first thing is cycling. Cycling is so much better, I would say, in the UK. I'd say the UK is probably one of the best countries in the world for cycling. A few reasons. First of all, drivers generally, when you get out of the big cities, are pretty considerate to give you quite a lot of space. They're not rushing anywhere. In the cities, yeah, it's a bit of a different story, but where we live, it's literally one small road out and you're into the farmers' fields on the small country roads. And even in the UK, country roads normally have a pretty high standard. So even on a road bike, you can go down these country roads for like 10, 15, 20 miles and you barely see a car. Also in the UK, we don't have any stray dogs. Whoa. In the UK we don't have any stray dogs and they can be a pain in Ukraine and many parts of Eastern Europe. I remember Turkey, I was cycling also in Turkey and they were just a massive pain in the ass, jumping out everywhere, trying to bite the tyres, bite my legs. Especially on a bike. If you're walking they're normally okay, but if you're on a bike you can often spook them and they think it's like some kind of rabbit or something. So yeah, and thirdly, why I like cycling more in the UK than in Ukraine and in generally Eastern Europe is because it's pretty small distances between places. You can get to like 6 or 7 pretty cool places, little small towns, quite easily within a day, and they're all quite nice. So we can get to York in an hour, we can get to Howden in an hour, beautiful little town. We can get to Goole, not so beautiful but still quite interesting. Even Hull in a day you can quite easily get to. So there's lots and lots of cool places where you can get to quite easily, and distances generally in the UK between places are like 10-15 miles and you get a new town. Out in Ukraine you can be talking 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers just between towns and cities, well, between cities. So yeah, you can't really get to that many places. You just find yourself cycling non-stop basically in the middle of nowhere with just pretty bog standard villages every 5-10 miles, which are all the same, and you've seen one, you've seen them all, they're not so unique. So yeah, cycling is something which I'd say is much better in the UK, and I really do enjoy cycling in the UK. I bike everywhere and yeah, it's a good hobby of mine. Not so fun, I'd say, the further east you go in Europe the less fun it becomes, unless your idea of fun is biking away from stray dogs and being overtaken by centimetres. Second up, pubs. I love pubs in the UK. Whenever I'm back I spend probably too much time in them, to be honest. And yeah, pubs are so much more of an institution, I'd say, in the UK. So pubs in Ukraine, they're purely a place where you go to eat, drink, maybe watch football, and that's all. Whereas in the UK, pubs are still public houses, which is where the word pub obviously comes from. And there's basically a house for the whole community to go, and you meet people and you socialise and you have a laugh, and they're a lot more social. So pubs in the UK have kept this social element to them. In Ukraine I sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable going into a pub by myself, and it's very uncommon to start talking to people in a pub, even if you sit at the bar. Where in the UK you can basically walk, especially in the north of England, you can basically walk into any pub and guaranteed within like 5-10 minutes you're going to start chatting to some local who's been there for the last 10 years. And yeah, they're a bit more crazy as well, our pubs. So you don't normally get so many weird and wonderful things happening in the pubs in Ukraine. They're quite I'd say quite luxurious. They're always clean, immaculate, which is good, but yeah, quite predictable. Our pubs in the UK, you go in there, they're dirty, they're rough and ready, and yeah, you never know what's going to happen when you walk into the pub. When you walk down the local boozer on a Friday, Saturday night, you never know what's going to happen, and I guess that's part of the fun, that's part of the adventure of the pub, and you never know who you're going to talk to. Yeah, in Ukraine, pubs are much more routine. Like I say, very unusual to ever meet somebody in the pub. You go with your group, you have a big table. One more thing about pubs I like in the UK compared to pubs in over here, which also depends on, I mean, this is a pro and a con. Often, being me, I like just to pop in spontaneously to the pub. I know a pint after work, or just especially in the UK, like I said, it's the social element of it, and I like how you can just go in there, order your pint straight away, pay straight away, get your pint straight away, and then you can leave when you want. In Ukraine, they always expect you to go and sit down at the table. You have to wait for the table, you have to wait for the menu, you then order the beer, you have to wait for the beer, you then drink your beer, you have to wait for the waitress again, you have to then ask for the bill, you have to wait for the waitress to ask for the bill, you have to wait for the bill, you have to wait for the waitress to pick up the bill, you have to wait for her to get your change, and you have to wait for the change to come back to you, and also you have to wait, well, not really wait, but then you leave a tip, and that's also, it's all time basically. Whereas in Ukraine it's super efficient, literally 15 seconds, order, pay, get your beer, and you're on your way. So yeah, pubs, I would say, guys, are much better in the UK. Although I do like pubs in Ukraine more if we've got like a big table of people. So for example, we've got the ladies out, like 4 lads, 4 lasses. You can sit down at a table, you can order a massive table full of food, you can have drinks coming non-stop, you can fold the table. In the UK it's not so common to do that. So yeah, but I'd say if you're kind of by yourself and you just want a pint and maybe, I don't know, meet somebody unusual, then you can just go into the pub in the UK and easily, just like that, you can get talking, and yeah, happy days. We've got Hotel Bristol up here. You can see next to the top window. What a very fit-in hotel for me to be telling my favourite things about the UK next to. So guys, I would say third and final point, thing which I think is better in the UK than in Ukraine. I mean, I wouldn't really compare them, but I'd say it's something I definitely like about the UK, which isn't so present in Ukraine, and that is just the openness and the friendliness of random people. This is also, it's a bit of a pro and a con, so don't get me wrong, there are times when I don't really feel like having a chat, and there are times when this can be quite annoying, when the cashier starts a conversation and starts looking at the food she's scanning and saying, oh, where are you going tonight? Oh, that's a nice bit of lamb you've got there. When are you going to have it? These kind of questions. That can be a bit funny to start with, but that can get a bit annoying when, you know, you're in a rush somewhere, you're not really in the mood for a chat, and you're given like question 20 from the cashier. However, I'd say after living in Ukraine quite a few years now, generally I'd say it's a good thing. The openness of strangers, the friendliness of strangers. In Ukraine, people can be a little bit non-trusty towards people they don't know. It can be quite hard to meet people often. So when you meet people in Ukraine, they're very good friends. They can become very good friends. They're very loyal. They're very friendly, very polite. So in that regard, Ukrainians make fantastic friends. But as strangers getting to the level where you become friends, in England it can literally be 2 minutes. Get chatting to a guy, oh, he's my mate now. Oh, I met her. Alright mate, how's it going? Yeah. You chat to him every time you come in, and if somebody asks you about him, you'd say, oh yeah, he's a mate of mine. In Ukraine it takes a long time to get to that level of friendship. I'd say it takes a few months at least to even get to the level where you start to call each other drug, which is friend. I do like the openness, especially again in the north of England, so I didn't notice this so much in London, but in the small towns and cities and villages, especially in northern England, yeah, people are so open, strangers are so open and friendly. And I'd say the good side of this, in terms of being able to just strike up a conversation with anybody and not feeling kind of socially awkward when you're somewhere by yourself chatting to somebody. I'd say that massively outweighs the slight inconvenience sometimes of other people also talking to you randomly. But yeah, the friendliness of random people, I would say, in the UK is something which I am very fond of. Although sometimes this can be a bit too much. For example, sometimes you're walking the dog and you kind of almost expected these days to smile at everybody and be super happy and say, oh, hello there, how's your day? When you're just walking the dog and you want a bit of time to yourself. And it's even to the extent where you sometimes feel a bit rude walking with earphones in, just in case you pass somebody and just in case they're waiting, smiling like a little Labrador at home. Say hello, say hello. So sometimes it can be a little bit too much, I would say, especially for Ukrainians who have just moved to the UK, and even for me, who has spent a long time in Ukraine. Every time I just come back to the UK, I can often have a bit of a stone face survival technique in Ukraine. So I can often be a little bit, and maybe it's perceived as being a little bit blunt. I don't want to be perceived in that way. It just takes normally a couple of weeks to actually get back into the less stone-faced, more open smiling. So for example, if you smile in Ukraine, it's very absurd, I would say, if you just smile at a stranger. It's weird. It's like, why are you smiling at me? What's wrong with you? Like, do I know you? Like, I don't trust you because you're smiling at me. What do you want from me? Kind of, are you cuckoo in the head or something? Whereas in England, yeah, it's the opposite. If you don't smile at people, especially in the countryside, you can be perceived as being a bit odd, a bit weird, like a bit dodgy maybe, a bit cold. So yeah, it's a massive, massive contrast. I would say Ukraine is one of the, if it's a spectrum of friendliness to strangers, I would say Ukraine's at the absolute bottom of this spectrum, along with many of the other Eastern European kind of former Soviet countries. Not so trustworthy of strangers, quite stone-faced to start with, whereas the UK is the absolute opposite, especially in the north of England. I've never been to a place where strangers are so friendly to each other and so polite to each other. So it's like two total opposites of the spectrum there, and it takes a long time for me to get used to going back and forth. When I'm here, I may be seen as being too smiley to start with, and when I'm in the UK, I'm seen as being too stone-faced to start with. It takes a couple of weeks each end to adjust. So, number one thing which I like about Ukraine, probably more than the UK, and for me this is a very important one. This is one of the main reasons why I moved here, and I would say it's because the general mentality of society is healthier here, I would say. So in the UK these days it's very much hedonistic, very much about having fun, living for today, which I like also, but to a certain level. The Ukrainian mentality is much more stoic, I would say, much more accepting the pain and suffering of life, instead of trying to fight it and constantly run away from it or mask yourself, mask this with kind of hedonism, with cozy things, with comfort. Ukrainians kind of accept that, yeah, the shower's going to be turned cold and there's nothing we can do about it. So yeah, pretty tough people here, and I like that. There's a real drive over here to the kind of philosophy of the kind of Ukrainian stoicism is to leave your comfort zone, is to get out, is to achieve stuff. Society in Ukraine really punishes people who don't achieve. So in England you can quite easily not do much with your life and you can still live quite comfortably. Working part-time, maybe getting some kind of payouts. Society doesn't really punish people. In Ukraine, if you get to like 25 or 30 and you've done nothing with your life, especially as a man, then society and life is going to punish you so hard. Your life is going to be very, very hard. It's going to be hard even if you are successful and you do achieve things, but it's going to be at least meaningful. And that's where I'd say in Ukraine, people, especially the male population, value meaning in their life and pursuit. In the West, more and more now, it's kind of hedonism, it's living for today, it's having a good time, it's if it feels good, do it. Which, I mean, yeah, there's a time and a place, but I think it's ultimately a recipe for disaster in terms of the mental health of young men. I think ultimately it results in a lot of men 25, 30, 35, still living at home without much to show. Not that I'm a perfect example, although I do like to think I've been out and seen the world at least, even if I don't have so much materialistically to show for that, apart from my blogs and my backpack. So I find for me Ukraine's a fantastic place to motivate myself, and it's a fantastic place to, I feel like it's a country, even despite the war at the moment, and of course there's lots of traumatized people, but generally it's a country in a pretty clear headspace, I would say. They know what they want, they know where they're going, they know what they need to do over here. So for me, one thing I love about Ukraine is this stoic mentality. Second thing which I like more in Ukraine than in the UK is public transport, especially trains. So generally public transport, I wouldn't say the quality is better, but I'd say it's so much cheaper than back in the UK. So I was in York 2 weeks ago with the missus, and we got a return just to like 2 miles there, 2 miles back, £10. Two people on a small local bus to go 2 miles return, £10 pound. Over here that would be probably 50 pence maximum for two people there and back. So public transport is much more affordable, and secondly trains always on time, much more affordable than in the UK, much more comfortable also in my opinion. So they're still the old school style sleeper trains mainly. Yeah, they take much longer, they can take like 20 hours to get somewhere, but you can sleep, you can chill out, it's more of an experience over here. These are trains with soul instead of the kind of anonymous, I don't know, laboratory feeling, squeaky clean compartment, well not on a Saturday mind you, compartments on tracks. So I'd say public transport and trains in Ukraine are much better. In the UK they're always on strike, it seems, they're always cancelled, they're always delayed, and then when you do get on the trains they don't put on enough carriages, especially on the weekend, and it's like some kind of cattle market, everyone crammed in like this, and for that privilege you're paying £20 to get less than 20 miles. So yeah, trains over here and public transport generally much better, much more affordable and much more reliable, I would say, than back in the UK. So guys, sorry I couldn't finish the video yesterday. My camera died halfway through the final video. Maybe there's a bit of an echo here, hopefully not too bad. I'm going to finish off now the one final thing I prefer about Ukraine compared to the UK. And that is, I would say, more personal freedom on a day-to-day level. So I'd say in Ukraine generally, nobody cares what you do. And I'm talking about day-to-day things. I'm not talking about obviously robbing a bank or hitting somebody in the face. That's probably more likely to be tolerated in the UK, to be honest, than in Ukraine. I'm talking more about nobody really caring what you do on a day-to-day level, and also less health and safety legislation, restrictive health and safety, illogical health and safety legislation. Sometimes, admittedly, Ukraine can be too far the other way, so sometimes maybe a little bit more health and safety here wouldn't be bad. When it comes to health and safety in Ukraine, the responsibility is very much with the individual. So it's kind of like, don't be an idiot, assess the situation, and if you do get injured, it's your fault, it's your life. You can choose. You're an adult, you can make these choices. Nobody's going to stop you doing anything. You do it and you hurt yourself, then that's your fault. Whereas in the UK, the responsibility for health and safety and the responsibility for the well-being often of fully grown men and adults is with employers, it's with the government, it's with the local authorities. And I don't like this. In my opinion, there's nothing worse than a nanny state. Whereas in Ukraine, personal, individual privacy and freedom is much more valued, and yeah, people really don't care what you do as long as it's inside the law, and if it's dangerous then it's up to you. Nobody's going to stop you doing something. If you get hurt, it's your fault. If you need to go to hospital, you're the one footing the bill. So ultimately it's very much with the individual over here. It seems to me that the government in most Western countries are starting to treat their citizens like kids. When you walk around the train station these days, or like a tube station, and every single where you go, there's information. Not just safety information, but also kind of social recommendations,
don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, this is classed as this, and also about health as well. So I see everywhere, this is a sign of this, this is a sign of this. Everywhere you go, it's like, if you have this symptom, go here. Everywhere you go in the UK, more and more, it seems like the local surroundings are becoming more and more parental, telling you what to do with your life. For example, I went onto a high street recently in the UK, and it's becoming more and more common from what I hear. There's like a 10 command board, like an electric board, telling you the rules of the high street. So as adult human beings, we need to know the rules of a high street. What rules can there possibly be? Like elementary things, like, I don't know, don't start on people, or don't just start harassing women as they walk past. This is just so obvious to, like, I say, especially in Ukraine, this is just like so obvious to everybody. So of course we don't need to be reminded to not harass people. We don't need to be reminded to not approach people and start issues. We don't need to be reminded to not drop our litter on the floor. Whereas in the UK, it seems like, I don't know if people need to be reminded, or what I suspect is more likely, the governments and the politicians are massively overreaching, and they think that you need to be told. They don't think you are a fully autonomous, responsible adult. They think you're basically a child in a adult body. Whereas in Ukraine, you don't see any of this. The only information you see is absolutely vital information. And yeah, one thing, if somebody says to me in the UK that something is hard or something is dangerous, I don't normally believe them. So, that is dangerous. Oh, you mean like, I don't know, normally something which is classed as being dangerous in the UK is, yeah, potentially could be dangerous if you're an idiot. But like, for 99% of people, it's perfectly fine. In Ukraine, when somebody says something might be a bit dangerous or something might be a bit hard, I believe them 100%. I know they're, if anything, under exaggerating, and I know if a Ukrainian says to you something could be a bit difficult or a bit dangerous, you know 100% it's going to be dangerous, it's going to be difficult. So in the UK, the meaning of danger and the meaning of difficulty is being watered down, which is quite dangerous in itself, ironically, because this means that when something actually is dangerous and there is some actual critical, important information about something, people will have been so numbed down by the constant danger, attention, danger, that they're not actually going to pay attention, because it's like the boy who cried wolf. Oh yeah, I know your danger. Yeah, okay. Sanitize your hands. Danger. Not standing 1 meter behind the massive yellow line on the train station, kind of danger. Your words can be dangerous, kind of danger. We live in a constant state in the UK, I would say these days, of ultra high attention. There's so many things competing, so many things are dangerous, don't do this, if you have this. So much supposed danger everywhere, and yeah, that we're probably going to be quite numbed down to actual danger when it does come. And also in Ukraine, one thing is that generally if you can't do something, or somebody says, oh, так нельзя, you shouldn't do it, it means you shouldn't do it. If you really want to do it, it's probably a way you can still do it. Could involve some money, could involve just sweet talking somebody, could involve just, okay, sign this and it's at your own risk. In the UK, no means no 100% when it comes to authority. You wanting to do something, they say no, that is absolutely no. You want to go into a club, for example, they say no, that is no. There's no chance you're getting in. Even if the reason they give for not letting you in, you can prove this is false, they still won't let you in on principle. They say, this is just our policy. We've declined you, you've been told no, we legally, maybe not legally, but our policy is that we cannot let you in tonight. This happened to me in Dublin, which isn't the UK, admittedly, but I was travelling with my bag and I went to a bar on a Saturday night in my tracky bottoms with my rucksack. Rucksack, fine, put it into the cloakroom. Tracky bottoms, unfortunately, not your night tonight, son. Try again tomorrow. I said, oh, okay, because of the tracky bottoms? Yep. Okay, no worries. I've got some jeans in my bag. I'll put them on. Just come. No. Sorry, mate. That's a terrible Irish accent. I won't even try. No. Sorry, mate. You've been declined. We can't let you in. But the reason you're declining me for is changeable in an instant, and I can then be suitable candidate to come into the club. No. Sorry, we've just got a policy. No means no. And I'm sure I could have probably offered them like £1,000 there and then, or €1,000, and they'd still said no. In Ukraine, it's much more flexible. For example, you have this situation. First of all, it's very unlikely you're going to be declined into a club. But if you are, then there's always a bit of negotiation. A bit of, okay, why? Okay, well, that's not the case. Please let me in. Maybe. Okay, well, all else has failed here. $10, $15. Or, okay, look, I'm going to spend money in here. I'll put a deposit on the table and I'll make sure I spend all that. Something like this. This is a very extreme case. This never happens in Ukraine, but it's one potential example of how you could talk and negotiate your way around a no. Generally in the UK, when there's a no by authority or somebody in a position of authority, that means no. Not tonight, you're not getting served. No, you're not getting in. No, we can't do that for you. No, we're not letting you do that. That means a firm, solid no. In Ukraine, it's much more flexible. No often means you shouldn't do it. Should you want to continue, then there's maybe something we can do about that. I'd say in Ukraine, you have more freedom to do what you want. Obviously this freedom has its downsides too. So you need a very responsible nation to be able to have as much freedom as many Ukrainians have. I should say had more probably before the war. But yeah, generally before the war, people in Ukraine, if somebody wants to do something and we generally know what's right and wrong, and we generally know what's on and what's not on. And if somebody wants to do something and it's generally on, then yeah, not a cat in hell's chance this person can't do it. In the UK, not always the case. So it's double-ended. Of course, in the UK, you have a big safety net. It's very hard to get into. In Ukraine, you can get into pretty bad situations quite fast if you're not careful. And that's probably the other side of the enhanced freedom. So I'd say in Ukraine, you have more freedom, but also you can get yourself into a hole probably faster than in the UK, and you can get yourself into a tricky situation probably faster than in the UK. Because here we don't have the safety nets in Ukraine, which are in place in the UK. So generally, I can liken it to being an adult and being a child. So being a child, you have your parents, you have the safety net, and you also have limited freedom. I would say that's more the UK. Many people I understand enjoy this safety net. They like this safety net. It's a lifeline to many people. In the same way as a parent supporting a child is also kind of the only way this child can survive. In Ukraine, there's none of this. It's very much an adult relationship. Do what you want, but nobody cares. Nobody's going to be there when things go tits up.